Oh, thank you today. Thank you for being here today with me and giving me this chance. And I really, the first question that came to mind, and I'm being asked endlessly on the campaign trail, is what, given all the revenue losses related to COVID and everything that's happening, what are we, you know, how's Illinois looking from a future standpoint? What's your perception on that?
Well, Suzanne, I was going to say happy to be with you, but then you start off with a question like that. That's not a very nice introduction. Yeah, Illinois has problems. Clearly, we've seen a significant drop-off in revenue. We've seen a real increase in expenses regarding healthcare. And a lot of stuff has been thrown into turmoil that we're going to see falling downhill. You know, whether it be our schools for increased costs they have to deal with this virus. You're going to see municipalities really hurting, and you're going to see police and fire budgets having to be cut. You know, these are things that the public expects government to provide, but there's not going to be the revenue for this unless the federal government comes in and offers some help. And this is not just help for Illinois. You know, Illinois, we have our unique problems and circumstances, and we've had them for a while, but this is across the country. This is not mismanagement by state government at this moment in time. This is something that steps we were forced to take because of the pandemic, because we weren't serious about it and didn't knock it down earlier. Businesses had to be shut down, bars and restaurants. That meant a lot less tax revenue there. People were losing their jobs, so they weren't going out and spending. You know, if you don't have consumer confidence, if you don't have consumer spending money, it's really detrimental to your economy, not just in Illinois, not just in McHenry County, but around the country. Mm-hmm. And states that supposedly are better managed also have these problems. I'm on calls with the National Association of State Treasurers, and every treasurer is arguing for this. Democrat, Republican, conservative, progressive, it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump don't seem to care. They seem to think that they can score points by blaming this on mismanagement. Well, I can tell you, this is a problem of mismanagement. This is a problem of our federal government mismanaging our response to COVID-19. This caused problems through every state in the country, some worse than others, but all have been impacted. Yeah. The House, fortunately, has come together and put together an aid package that would help us get through this time. Help us weather the storm without dramatic layoffs. Unfortunately, it languishes in the Senate, where a lot of good things go to die under Mitch McConnell. I'm sure Senator Durbin can talk about that better than me, though.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you talking about what other states are talking about, because we continue to only hear Democratic-run states are having a problem, and I think people don't get that insight that this is a national issue. And it is largely led by the mismanagement at the top, which has resulted in the problems we're having. So that's a message I gladly take back to the calls I'm having. So thank you for that. I've been thinking a lot about this too, but what, in your view, what are some of the untapped sources of revenue comparative to other states that we could utilize here in Illinois?
Well, I think the big thing, and the thing that voters are going to have some say in, is the fair tax this fall. We have been hampered in the past because a lot of Democrats and some Republicans privately will tell you we need new revenue to pay our bills. That is a conservative principle. Mm-hmm. Paying your bills, paying them on time. Unfortunately, the Republicans talk a good game about that, but don't really want to actually pay their bills on time. And they elected a commander-in-chief who's notorious and has a long track record of hiring people to do work and not paying his obligations, shirking on his obligations. And we see that now, I think, spilling into government. You know, we need to be able to pay our bills, but unfortunately, a lot of colleagues who would like to raise revenue and pay for these things don't want to raise taxes on working families, don't want to harm the poor out there. You know, middle-class families have really been struggling, and they haven't seen a way to do this because Illinois has a flat tax rate. You know, the majority of states out there have a progressive tax system. I sponsored legislation of our constitutional amendment years ago to allow Illinois to amend our Constitution and have different rates. I can't tell you the abuse that was heaped upon me during debate. I was told that this would destroy our economy. Well, I've done a little research, and the federal government, the United States of America, has had the ability to tax at different rates, and we have taxed different rates for well over 100 years. And in that time, we have seen phenomenal growth as a country, because we know that when we take these dollars and then invest them wisely, now you can't just throw money away, but when you invest it into your infrastructure, your roads and your bridges, that helps our businesses to grow. When you invest it in education and you have a better workforce, you attract more businesses and you create more entrepreneurs with a better educated workforce. These are the kind of things the government needs to be spending money on. Mm-hmm. These are the kind of things that will pay off dividends in the future and help to grow our economy. And for some of those people who are saying that, no, we can't have any more money, we have to cut back our spending, I think they're being short-sighted. They're willing to cut off their noses to spite their face. When they talk about our future and our children, we need to be investing in our children. They are our best future. We need to be investing, reinvesting in our infrastructure if we really want to be helpful to our businesses.
So it's interesting because that reminds me of, I watched this documentary a couple days ago, and it talked about the flip. There was a person on the recording that talked about, he's a millionaire many times over, owns this business. And he said, we always hear about tax cuts and giving those breaks to the top CEOs because they're the job creators. And he said, in reality, in a consumer-driven economy like ours, the workers are the job creators because they're the ones that go out and buy the products that the businesses then make to make more products to buy. It's a paradigm shift. And I loved that idea that, it really is working people are the job creators, not these top CEOs and whoever's that we look to as doing that. No, it's the other way around.
Well, I like to tell people about two good friends of mine that I grew up with. One from college, one I grew up with, and one of them joined the trades as a union job. He works good hours in the summer and in the fall. In the winter, he's usually laid off. My other friend went to college with me. He went to go work on Wall Street. I can tell you they make very different amounts of money. But the other thing I can tell you, though, is when my friend Joe, who works in the trades, when he has a good year, when he has extra money to spend, do you want to know how Joe spends it? Joe goes out and buys a vehicle. And Joe will buy a truck, and he'll buy an American-made truck.
Yeah.
When Joe takes a vacation, Joe will go up in northern Wisconsin, and he will go hunting, and he'll sit in a tree stand for a while. And he spends his money at a local bar or a local restaurant. If he has just a little extra money in his pocket, he probably goes to spend it at the local tavern. That's just Joe. Now, my friend Bob, and I've changed both their names in case you want to. My friend Bob, who lives in New York City and makes bonuses, annual bonuses, far in excess of what Joe would ever make in a year. If you cut his taxes and give him some extra money, he might buy a new vehicle, but chances are it's going to be a luxury import vehicle. When he takes a vacation, he goes to Europe, or he goes on a safari in South Africa. Yeah. Joe is also spending money, but Joe doesn't spend his money in America. Bob. Bob doesn't spend his money in America like Joe does.
Yeah.
And Joe, I can tell you, spends all of his money. Bob saves money. He invests. He invests some in American companies. He invests some in European. He invests some in Asia. And so I just ask people, you all know people like this. When you give more money to working people, more of that stays in America and more of it circulates through our economy in America. When you give tax cuts to those job creators, you really, some of that money is going to help people overseas and it's invested overseas. So I just think that when you help keep more money in the pockets of working class people, it is more beneficial to our economy.
Yes, I agree. And how we bring that narrative, I think that's important. And talking about it that way is really important. So yeah, I agree with you. So I'm curious, actually, as you were talking, I'm a little bit curious to know from an economic standpoint, and this might be something more for myself, but economically, when you look back at people, economists, is there a particular view that you influenced you more than others? I mean, are you a Milton Friedman follower? You don't sound like one, but I'm just curious.
No, in the treasurer's office, we actually believe that Milton Friedman has been very detrimental to the economy. And it's because he pushed this fallacy that the shareholders in corporations should be the primary consideration for the corporation. You know, there are lots of different stakeholders in a company. Shareholders are one of them. The employees are an important stakeholder. The customers are a very important stakeholder. The communities that these companies are located in are important stakeholders. Yep. And if you disregard the other ones, you're opening yourself up to risk. So if you treat your workers very poorly because you have to cut costs and return more bonuses to shareholders, eventually those workers do things like go on strike. Or if you cut them down, they don't have money to buy the products you're making. You know, if you don't consider the environment, you know, sure, you can pollute directly into the air and the water, but then you run the risk of having governmental fines, or you run the risk of ruining your reputation. People don't necessarily want to buy products from a company that's polluting our environment. If you try and raise prices and lower quality, that can be helpful in the short run for your bottom line, but eventually your customers say, I'm tired of buying an expensive, bad product, and they go to your competition. So I really take this approach that you've seen with the head of BlackRock recently writing a letter, and the Business Roundtable came out and said, we need to consider all of the stakeholders of our corporations, not just the shareholders, as putting us on a path towards a more sustainable future, long-term investing with long-term growth. And that's sort of more my philosophy.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm a small business owner. So the other thing for me is I don't believe we can look at small businesses the same way as we look at large corporations. And I hope, at least at the state level, one thing I want to do is to look at how can we generate more of that small business engine, because I do see that as one of our factors of recovery after COVID, is sparking more of that entrepreneurial small business engine here in the States, so that we can get people back to work and generate more. So that I appreciate that philosophy.
And we try and create programs in the Treasurer's office to help those small businesses, whether it be access to capital to get through tough times, or helping them with things like, it can be expensive to set up a 401k, but small business owners still want to give their employees an opportunity to save for their future and to build wealth. And so we set up the Illinois Secure Choice program to help people save their own money for their retirement in a way that's easy for them to do.
Huh. Well, you just transitioned right into the next question, which is, as the treasurer, what do you actually do, and how has COVID-19 changed the landscape of your work? Obviously, one is you work from home now, right?
Yes, this is my home office. I've been here for 5 months, with occasional times that I escape prison, flee my jail cell. But, we're lucky we can do a lot of our work remotely. I'm the chief investment officer for the state of Illinois. And for the longest time, we haven't been doing our trades in person. We do them electronically. So as long as our employees have access to the internet and telephones, they can do that from home, we can conduct most of our investment activity. Mm. Now, we're also in charge of things like unclaimed property. It's a great part of my job, returning money to people in the state. Recently had a milestone where we've returned over $1 billion to Illinois residents since coming into office.
Congratulations, I read about that.
Thank you. It was an exciting time. We've come in and we've worked cooperatively with the General Assembly. So when you get in, we'll look forward to working with you. We have ideas of how to improve the system to return even more money to people. So it's that sort of cooperation and focusing on results that have really driven us. Now, COVID has changed the nature of our work. It's definitely changed our location. But that still sort of commitment to innovation and focus on our job and spurring results, we haven't seen much of a drop-off. We've actually seen an increase in claims processed in unclaimed property. We're in charge of college savings accounts. We've seen an increase in the number of accounts created. Part of that might be people are at home and they have more time to read their emails from us. We changed our marketing to reach people and let them know that they need to be planning for their kids' future, because we don't know what education really is going to look like this next year. And we don't know exactly how it might be transformed going forward. But what we do know is kids are going to continue to need to get an education. And more it's going to be important to have higher education. And parents need to be saving for that and planning for that. And that's one of the things we help them to do.
That I have a sophomore in college, so another one that finished college. I know all about that. So that, you talked about the iCash program, and I read the article, and I thought it was fantastic that you achieved such results. So I'm curious, how else could we apply that sort of efficient mindset to other state programs? I mean, I'm thinking particularly of IDES right now with the unemployment nightmare we've had, people not getting their money. Are some of these principles things, you did it in your department, is that possible to get that done in other areas too?
Yeah, it's possible. The solutions aren't always easy, but they're out there if you're willing to work hard, roll up your sleeves, and work with other people. When we came in, we inherited a system that was paper-driven. There were big backlogs. Sometimes it would take people 12 weeks or more to get their unclaimed property. Well, we came in and brought in new technology to make things go faster. We went to the General Assembly that gave us permission to do more of our work electronically, allowing people to file their claims electronically, allowing us to do internet searches to verify someone's address history. These things allowed us to get a lot more money out the door faster and eventually work down on our backlog. Now, during COVID, we saw it increase a little bit. So then we changed our process again and adapted, and we started driving that down again. But you have to be conscious. You have to be working on this and be listening to people and getting ideas as things change. It's not easy. And if you insist on doing things the way you've always done them, chances are you're going to run into problems. Government, we need people to be creative. There's a reason why when you get elected to the General Assembly, you will meet every year and bills will be filed every year. And people will say to me, why do you have to file so many bills? Why do you have to create so many laws? Because we're constantly looking at the results. Sometimes we pass a bill and there are unintended consequences, sometimes positive, often negative. So we come back next year and file another bill to fix those problems. And then there are changes in technology out there that no one can foresee, but when they come, it's our job in government to respond and to update our systems to reflect those changes. Hopefully to learn from the business sector and make ourselves more efficient.
I always say that people say, government should be run like business until they don't want it to run like a business, right? Which is, I think COVID has exposed some of that. With the last few minutes we have, I just have a quick question. I know at the county, we have investments and our investments have done very well, especially in the last 5 years. Our treasurer just really, she's done a really good job with that. So I was looking at one of our budgets are happening right now. It's actually been okay. Our investments have been okay. How's the state doing with investments?
So with state investments, we've been good because the 3 requirements I've given in terms of investments is preservation of capital. I'm not allowed to take an awful lot of risk. To maintain liquidity so that we can pay our bills and to get as good a return as possible. Now those 3 are often in conflict with each other. If you want to get higher returns, you take some more risk. If you want to be very conservative, you're going to sacrifice risk. But because we don't invest state funds directly, so the money that comes in from taxes into the stock market, we've seen our returns holding steady. Now, as the Federal Reserve has lowered rates, that is going to harm our ability to bring in good returns for the state of Illinois, but we're adapting and we're doing the best that we can. Where the state does invest in equities or in the stock market is in our pension funds. And there, in February, March, and early April, we took a really big hit. It was difficult to watch because this is our state employees' retirement security, their future.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we have seen a stock market really untethered from the reality of our economy. Let this be a great lesson. The stock market is not the economy. At a time we've seen some of the highest unemployment rates since the Great Depression, time we've seen businesses really struggling, the stock market, which is your publicly traded large companies, has done very well. A lot of people are betting that these changes are going to be helpful to big tech companies, whether it be Amazon or Facebook or any other big companies out there. But I can tell you, if you're living and working on Main Street, things are not quite so rosy.
No.
I mean, especially if you owned a restaurant or a bar, this is going to be a very difficult year, and many of them have chosen to shut their doors. There are going to be consequences for this, and I think it's up to us to be creative in finding ways to help them.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you so much. It's so helpful, and I appreciate you just taking the time to speak with me today, and glad to know that you are at the helm. That makes me feel good. So thank you very much for that. Hold on, I'm gonna.
Well, I'll just say, Suzanne, I look forward to working with you. We have lots of ideas in the Treasurer's Office. I'm sure you do as well. And I find that if we work together, if we listen to each other, we can move this state forward.
Love that. Thank you so much. Hold on.